Well, good morning. It's good to see you all back. Hope you had a good sleep, get some good food and exercise this morning. So we're going to be continuing our discussion in hormones this morning. Okay, so yesterday, for those who weren't here, we were covering digestion, laying the foundation for how this is important for hormone production and hormonal balancing. And so today we're going to look more specifically at certain hormones and how things work and how we can get our bodies in line with God's plan. So we're going to be looking at some more in-depth study into the hormonal system and the natural remedies for those systems. So statistics show 80% of women suffer from hormonal imbalance. Now, I don't think this was the state of things about 100 years ago. In fact, I don't think this was the state of things about 20 years ago, right? It's got progressively worse, and many women don't even know they have a hormonal imbalance, don't know that they may have PCOS or fibroids or endometriosis and all kinds of complaints. Now, I want you to keep in mind that the endocrine system is really under the nervous system, okay? So it's a two-way street because, of course, what affects the nerves affects endocrine. What affects endocrine does also, in turn, play back to affecting the nerves. So, but the master operator of the master glands is actually the nervous system, and there's nerve connections between the frontal lobe and the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So we're going to be looking at that a little bit more closely. So you can see there's nerve connections to every organ of the body, and we have nerve connections to glands. So every nerve is connected at the end point to either a gland or a muscular junction. And so thoughts, do you know every thought we think has an impact on every cell of the body? That's a profound thought, isn't it? Every thought you think has an impact because there are receptors on every cell of the body that can pick up hormones, all right? And that's how every hormone that's secreted by the body has an impact on every other hormone in the body, all right? So this is incredible. So hormones are to act like a symphony. So if you've been to a symphony, you'll see a guy up there with a stick, right? Baton, they call it. And he's directing. And he's got to bring in everyone and make everyone coordinated. And so that the violinist knows when to come in, and the pianist and the flute and all the other instruments. So I want you to think of this in sense of this is how the hormonal system works, okay? So it's not just one person playing. Everyone has a part, and they all work together to make beautiful melody. So when you end up taking hormones externally, guess what? You become the conductor. Okay? You're the one in charge with the baton. Because now you have to know when to bring in that hormone, how much to bring it in, and the body has to compensate for the things externally that we're bringing into the body. So the way God designed it was that basically He has set things up in the endocrine system so that everything is orchestrated and everything is synchronized. If you look at a lady's hormones over the month, it's not a straight line, is it? So when we're talking about balancing hormones, we're not expecting hormonal regulation to be consistent. We're expecting the hormones to play like music, right? And you're going to have good days and bad days and sad days. And okay, there's some, yes, days. That's right. We got to get you to sing for us here. All right, but so we're not looking at when we're talking about balancing hormones, we're not trying to focus on keeping them the same all the time. We're just looking at making sure they're playing the right music, okay? So that being said, we will cover a few hormones. Now, there are about 600 hormones in the body. Some tend to be more dominant in their effects than others. So I'm going to be covering some major hormones here that we probably are familiar with. First one is cortisol. So cortisol, we know this to be a stress hormone, but actually it's not just a stress hormone. Now, cortisol doesn't create stress. It's there because of stress. It's a glucocorticoid to help release sugar into the body so that we can have energy for emergencies. But there's two ways that cortisol can be stimulated in the body. One is stress, but the other is its own natural processes of regulation of sugar control, and also it helps with the immune system. It helps in stabilizing the integrity of the cell membrane. It helps with all kinds of functions that are necessary for adaptation, especially with the fight-or-flight response. So cortisol is good, but too much, too little can be a problem. So we have hypo and hyper. So hypo is too little. So if you have too little cortisol, you can have a poor immune system. Also, if you have too much, you can have poor immunity as well. And then people who have high levels of cortisol tend to be, and I say tend to be because there are exceptions, have weight loss, okay? All right, it contributes to weight loss. And then low energy, vitiligo, which is a skin condition where the pigmentation of the melanin is affected, and then it can set us up for increasing viruses in the body, okay? And then because it's involved in helping destroy viruses. And then we have darkened skin in some cases. We can set ourselves up for salt cravings. Okay, so people who have low adrenal function, they tend to need more sodium, more salt. Okay, now not all salt is created equal. So we're not talking about table salt. We're talking about, Jesus mentioned the salt of the earth. You're the salt of the earth. He didn't say salt of the ocean, did he? Okay, that's where they got their salt from, was predominantly from the ground. And the primary driver of this, not the only driver, but the primary driver is stress, okay? So let's look at if there's too much cortisol. Well, this can lead to belly fat. Allergies is another primary one. And because this can have an effect on histamine. And then diabetes. All right, that's very common. In fact, 20% of diabetics are slim like me because it's stress that's driving it, because they need more sugar. And so the sugar is higher for longer in the body. And then you have a race in mind. Anyone got that? Your brain just keeps, just can't shut down. The hard drive isn't switching off. All right, and that can affect our sleep, set us up for insomnia. High blood pressure, high cholesterol is another thing, because the body has to make more cholesterol in order to produce more stress hormones. So, as I mentioned before, your steroid hormones actually are based on cholesterol, okay? In fact, we looked at it yesterday. Cholesterol, pregnenolone, it can go to cortisol or progesterone. Underneath progesterone, we have estrogen and testosterone. So the more cortisol we have, the more shift of the hormones we're going to have. Okay, and then low vitamin D levels. That's can be problematic as well. Low vitamin D can contribute to a multitude of problems, especially with digestion and immunity. And then we have a condition called Cushing's syndrome, where you can get a round face. And this is not from just one high dose of cortisol, but a protracted period of time, usually years, to develop this. And then we have estrogen. Okay, so what happens if we have low estrogen? Then we can have depression. Okay, and so this is why commonly through a woman's menstrual cycle, this tends to happen. With the blues, it can happen with the estrogen going down. Then we can have dry skin, low libido, hot flashes, poor memory, insomnia, vaginal dryness. But besides that, you're good to go. Okay. All right. And then, but by the way, you may have you may have other issues. This is not exhaustive, but these are some of the most common ones. And then excess estrogen. You can have tender breasts, cysts. Okay, so you can have cysts on the ovaries, cysts, we call it polycystic ovarian disease. And then we have fluid retention. We can have heavy cycles, cramping, weight gain, and PMS. So these are very common. Now there are remedies for this, by the way. Okay, so these are some of the common causes. Okay, dairy is there primarily because there are a lot of dairy products that are high in estrogen. Okay, especially estradiol. And so that's good if you're a calf, but it's not good if you're human because it can really push estrogen in the body, and this can promote cell growth. It can lead to obesity. It can lead to mood changes and so on. And then we have EDs. These are endocrine disruptors. Okay, endocrine disruptors. Now I'll get into this in a few minutes, but basically this is anything that is going to disrupt the body's natural endocrine system by artificial chemicals that actually lodge into the endocrine receptors, and they can mimic the effects of our body's natural hormones, but they're artificial, and they can do a lot of damage. I'll get to that a little bit more as we go through. And then menopause and birth control. We're talking about birth control pills here, okay, because they usually have some estrogen with a tiny bit of progesterone. They used to just give estrogen, but they combined the two together now. The problem is that, as I said before, once you start introducing a hormone into your body, the body has to regulate its own secretions in accordance with how much is coming in, so it starts to lower the amount that it naturally produces. So this works for any hormone. And there's part of the brain called the pituitary gland, and it doesn't have a blood-brain barrier. It's one of 6 areas in the brain that doesn't have a blood-brain barrier, and it's like a little dipstick, and it detects the hormones that are in the blood going through the bottom of the brain, and then through a process of homeostasis, it starts to regulate, because it's talking with all the other glands, and it tells the other glands, I want you to secrete this, I want you to shut down that. And so let's say, for example, you're having a hard time sleeping, and so you take a hormone called melatonin. You familiar with that hormone, melatonin? So you put this melatonin into your body, and by the way, it's usually about 100 times, depending on the age, about 100 times what your body makes, okay? So then the pineal gland is notified, we got tons of melatonin in the body, so you need to stop producing it. So the body's natural production is impaired, so it stops producing that until that melatonin gets out of the system. When that melatonin's out of the system, then it starts to activate it again. However, the longer you're on the artificial melatonin, the more the body doesn't produce. Okay, it shuts it down to a point. Just like if you don't, there's a saying, right? If you don't use it, you lose it, right? So the body starts to shut down the hormone production over time, incrementally, to a point where once you come off that medication, then you're going to have a roller coaster ride. Yeah, because it's going to take a long time for you to get back to where you were before. So the longer you're on a hormone, the more time it can take to regulate that, okay? All right, so, and these things often get touted as they're okay to use, they're healthy to use. There was back in I think it was the beginning of the 1940s, there was a birth control pill that came out that was supposed to help with hormonal issues, and it was also touted as to help with just reducing risk of certain hormonal issues. What was the name of it? Diethylstilbestrol. And basically, it was put on the market for 30 years, and it was given to just countless of women. And then later on, it was found to produce in 1970s birth defects and endometrial cancers and uterine cancers. And it was still, after all the research came out, it was still on the market for another 10 years, but it was fed to chickens. So if you grew up in the 1970s eating chickens, chances are you probably got some of this in your body. The point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of things that get put on the market for tens of years, and we're told they're safe, and then later we find out they're not as safe as we thought they were. All right, and then HRT, hormone replacement therapy. So even if you have some hormones now called bioidentical hormones. So bioidentical hormones are considered identical to what the body produces. And you think, well, that's good, isn't it? Because if it's the same as what your body produces, then it will act the same in the body. The problem is you've just handed over the baton. Okay? So now you're the one in charge of regulating when it comes in, how much to come in. And so even though it's identical to what the body makes, you're still going to have a roller coaster ride. This is why, even though insulin is helpful for type 2 diabetics, they're still on this roller coaster, right? It's very hard to regulate. Okay, same with if you're on levothyroxine for your thyroid gland. You'll have a harder time regulating that because of the amount that you're introducing to the body at one go. And so this is a problem. It's not just using chemicals that are foreign to the body, but it's using even substances that are actually chemically the same as what the body makes, but it's bypassing the natural mechanisms that God has put into play to keep those things in the right place at the right time. Then we have thyroid issues. Okay, so yesterday I said I would talk about the thyroid. And most people have low thyroid function. 90% of hypothyroidism is what we call Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition where the thyroid starts to get attacked and we have inflammation that happens. And what I found just from my personal experience after talking to hundreds of ladies and men who have thyroid issues, two of the primary causes for this is stress and liver issues. Okay, and I'll tell you why, because both of them affect T3 conversion. So stress will actually cause the cortisol to raise, and that will sabotage T3 conversion. It will also affect the interleukins that mediate between the local tissue and the immune system, and so it sets up wrong signaling, a bit like sending a text message that wasn't the right message you wanted to send, and it causes the immune cells to attack. And then the liver is 80% of T3 conversion is actually based from the liver. So if you have an unhealthy liver, yesterday we looked at the fatty liver. Okay, if you've got a fatty liver, you're going to have a harder time converting T4 to T3, which is the active form. Therefore, you're going to have a harder time regulating body temperature, and you're going to have a harder time basically with the moods as well and the hormones. Okay, this can affect the sex hormones. So usually the thyroid is a secondary problem. Okay, there is something undergirding that. Okay, and for most of the time it's usually adrenals. So the adrenals get exhausted. This happens especially in ladies. You see in their late 40s, early 50s. This is often when it starts to manifest itself because of changes of sex hormones. So 30% of your sex hormones are actually released through the adrenals. Did you know that? So when you stop, with your cycle, your adrenals are still helping you with these sex hormones. Okay, so you don't completely shut down estrogen production, your progesterone production. And so God established this so that when you hit menopause, the adrenals can gracefully transition you over into that period of life, okay? But if you've had a lot of stress, then your adrenals can't transition you as effectively, as easily. So you end up on these roller coasters. Okay, so what usually happens, your adrenals go first, then the thyroid goes next, then the sleep goes out, the weight goes on, the hormones go out, hubby goes out, and it just dominoes from there. Okay, all right. So everything cascades through this progression of your stress coming into play here, all right? Okay, so then, so in T3 conversion, so also is your autoimmune problems, okay? We'll cover this a little bit more as we go on. So if you have hyperthyroidism, you have excessive sweat, not always, but in many cases, nervousness, hyperactive mind, increases your heart rate, protracted eyes because your metabolism is increased, so it burns up some of the fat in your eyelids. Your eyes haven't got bigger, it just looks bigger, okay? And then insomnia comes into play here, and often people can't get to sleep or they can't stay asleep. And then your cycles shut down, weight loss comes into play here because your metabolism is so high, all right? And then let's look at testosterone. So if you're low testosterone, you can have hair loss, low sex drive, depression, fatigue, a loss of drive, just, you don't have much motivation to accomplish. Vaginal dryness, of course this is specific for women, and then weight gain. And then with hypertestosterone, we have hair loss, acne, deep voids, facial hair, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and usually it's because of insulin, like insulin resistance. Diabetics often have this, and then adrenal dysfunction. Okay, so these are all connected. If you affect one hormone, you affect all hormones. That's how it works, because they're all playing along with that song, and so, they have to be synchronized. If they're not synchronized, there's going to be bad music. And so all of these hormones have to play in the right harmony with the body's natural rhythms, okay? So all of this is also predicated on all of this. Okay, we're building a foundation because all these hormones come from what we eat. Okay, they're either made of, the sex hormones are made of fat, okay? The adrenal hormones, they're also the same. These body's natural steroids are made of fat. And then the other hormones are made of proteins, okay? So let's continue. Did someone have a question? Yes, Victoria. Oh, you had a question?
I was just wondering if stress can actually put you into menopause.
Yes, it can make you early menopause. In fact, I'm sorry my wife left, but I would ask her to testimony. But she was perimenopause at 34. Yeah. We had our second child at 43. Yes, but we had to deal with the stress. Yes, stress can accelerate aging as well. Yes.
The question was related to statins.
Yes.
Cholesterol.
Yes.
In the UK,
Yes.
they shove you on some statins.
Oh, yes.
I don't think they're very good, are they?
Statins lead to depression. Statins increase your risk of diabetes. Statins increase your risk of suicide. Right? Okay. Yes, yes. And it will affect men's drive. Yes. See, they're trying to interfere with the pathways from sabotaging cholesterol. And you need the cholesterol, but you don't want to be castrated, chemically castrated. Okay? The body will naturally work out the balance if left alone and you're on a good lifestyle. It will naturally do that. But once we start tinkering with hormones, we're juggling balls. Okay? And one ball leads to another ball being tossed in a way, and one medicine leads to another medicine. So when you take a statin, yes, your cholesterol may come down because it's interfered with cholesterol synthesis. At the same time, you're interfering with sex hormones. Yeah. There's a whole cascade of things that happen as a result of that. All right, so we live in a very plastic world. Can you give me a 5-minute, I've got 5 minutes left. Okay, so there is 85,000 chemicals that is made in the United States, I believe. There's about 1,000 of them that are considered to be endocrine disruptors. So endocrine disruptors are things, as I mentioned before, that mimic your body's natural hormones, that lodge into the receptors, or the hormonal receptors, but have detrimental effects. Okay? So they can look like what your body's making, and that's what helps them to get into the receptor. But they can promote cancer growth. They can affect your body's natural sex hormones. They can cause all kinds of problems with female reproductive system and also male production as well, because I'm coming to this, how serious a problem this is, because even the animals that are in the wild, even seals in Alaska, are having infertility issues. Yeah, I'll get to that. Okay, so endocrine disruptors acting on estrogen and androgen pathways cause reproductive disorders through multiple mechanisms. There's hundreds of articles been done on this. I won't bore you with them all, but I want to draw your attention to this study that was done from 1973 to 2018. There was a decrease in total sperm count of 62.3%. So nearly 2/3 of a drop in male sperm count. In how many years? Less than 50 or 45 years? Okay. It's been estimated if we get to 2050, there won't be a man alive that can actually procreate. Okay, this is how serious this problem is, okay? And also, not only the total sperm count, but also sperm motility is also affected. All right. Now, there are some websites you may want to write these things down, and there are even apps you can get that can tell you what the foods that you're consuming, what risk they are with endocrine disruption, okay? So you may want to make a note of this. If anyone wants a presentation, come see me after. I'd be happy to give this to you. But these endocrine disruptors are everywhere. They're in water, they're in foods that we're consuming, they're in cosmetics, they're in hair products, they're in skincare products, everywhere. But we can't completely get rid of them or away from them, but we can minimize our exposure, and that's the key. If we can minimize our exposure, then the body's natural hormones can work better. So food plays a big role in this. And as we looked yesterday at the intestines, this is where it all happens as far as absorption goes in the small intestines, right? So if we don't have proper digestion and assimilation, then the hormones are going to be affected. And I'll just give you an example of this. Say your pH of your acid in your stomach is, let's say, if it's above 3.8, it's above 3.8, then there's not enough acid there to keep the bacteria down. So the bacteria, they're very happy. You've heard of H. pylori? Okay, so about 50% of the population has H. pylori. Doesn't worry any of us until the acid is a problem. So if there's not enough acid, then the H. pylori starts to get out of hand. It starts to become rebellious. It starts to secrete urea. It has an enzyme secrete urea. It converts to ammonia. Ammonia is very high pH, and it protects itself from acidity, from future acidity, from destroying it. There's bacteria that create biofilms that cover themselves in like a disguised blanket, so the immune cells won't recognize them. I mean, it gets down to the intestines, and the bacteria start to eat your food. They take up your nutrition like parasites. So they start to use it for themselves, these bacteria, right? And you're eating all this healthy, good food, but you're not getting it. The microbes are getting it, right? All right, and that in turn affects the production of how much absorption of nutrition you're going to get, which affects hormones as well. And so it's a lot happens around this area that plays a vital part in not just the immunity but also the hormones. And it's in the intestinal flora. The microbiome communicates here with the immune system. It communicates, has direct communication with the immune system. And so if the microbiome is unhealthy, then the immune system also gets false signals, and it can set up an autoimmune disease, and it can start turning on yourself. All right, and so why are we getting all these autoimmune diseases? It's largely what happens in the gut. That's where the foundation is laid. And this plays out. All right, I'm glad I didn't have this for breakfast. Okay. Yes, these are sorts of food that the microbiome, it completely just gets decimated. They're healthy anyway. You end up with unhealthy microbiome, and that is what ends up communicating to your brain and sets you up for addictions later in life. What about what?
What about COVID and long-term COVID vaccine?
Oh, well, you open up a can of worms there. All right. Yes, it does. Yes. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And it's not just that particular one, it's also in general, because it has all these adjuvants, and it has things like squalene that interferes with cellular communication with the immune system. It has things like aluminum that overstimulates the immune cells. There's a lot of things that go into that, but that's for another subject. But anyway, the better your natural immunity. See, we have two types of immunity. We have innate immunity and we have adaptive immunity. When COVID hit, all the rage was adaptive immunity. We didn't talk about innate immunity. Innate immunity is 26 times more powerful than adaptive immunity. Okay, so they're your first responders. They're the ones that go into the scene. You can have no antibodies for a virus, and the body can still take care of it through the innate immunity. That's what engulfs them. We have these phagocytes that surround bacteria and viruses and can destroy them completely in a short amount of time. Okay, but when the body's weak, when the digestion is compromised, then it's a lot harder for the innate immunity to do its work effectively. Okay, so dairy products, they are very high in hormones, and also this here, insulin-like growth factor 1. This can stimulate breast cancer, prostate issues, a lot of different types of reproductive cancers, endometrial cancer. So just be aware of that. Okay, because we have what's called recombinant bovine growth hormone, and it's still given to cattle today in the United States. It's actually banned in Europe, but it's still given, and it's a hormone that causes an overproduction of growth. You can get a chicken, and you can take a chicken from a newly cracked egg, a newborn chicken, and in about 30 days, you can make it full-grown chicken. Okay, now I don't know if there's anyone here that's grown chickens, but it takes more than 30 days to get a full-grown chicken naturally, right? Okay. Yes. Am I stuck here? I'm a little stuck here. It's not working. All right. Can you just go to the next slide here? Okay. Thank you. So this is the FDA's website. They're still using these hormone implants in animals. That's the problem. And we're consuming them. No, we're not friends. Okay, let's go to the next one. Sorry, my clicker's not working here. I don't know if it's run out of juice. All right, so one of the best things for hormone regulation is exercise. All right, you know these laws of health, but I just want to bring it back to home, because if you don't get enough exercise, a lot of hormones can build up in your body and not be cleared out through the liver, and you can end up with mood swings. And this is very important for ladies around that time where estrogen starts to bottom out. Just go for a walk. Go and do some exercise. This is one of the best things for you. It'll make you feel good. If you have painful menstrual cramps, this is an excellent one to use. Oh, 5 minutes? Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, please. Sleep. Okay, sleep is essential for hormonal regulation, because before midnight you get a predominant burst of growth hormone. And growth hormone is very important for repaired tissue, for helping you to grow. It's also used for memory circuits to be solidified at night in the hippocampus. Also, you get melatonin. Now, melatonin is 60 times more important than vitamin C as an antioxidant, right? 60 times. So, melatonin is essential, okay? It helps put the top of the brain in control of the bottom of the brain. All right, so we're going to come, the second part of this presentation, and I won't be able to get through it all this morning, but we'll be covering how to regulate some of these using natural remedies, okay? But if you go to bed before midnight, that's the best sleep you're going to get before midnight, right? So if you can get to bed before 10 o'clock, like 9:30, even better. And if you have a hard time getting to sleep, there are some things that you can use for that. Just prepare yourself for sleep before sleep. So this is why God gives us sunsets, graduated sunsets. Don't do things stimulating to your eyes, like, computers with the bright glares. It will shut down melatonin production for about an hour after you switch it off. So go for a walk, take the dog for a walk, have a bath in Epsom salts, maybe take a nice cup of relaxing herbal tea, just pray, meditate, read the Bible, things like that. Things that are going to just help relax you, right? Because it takes a while to get prepared for sleep. And often ladies who wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. can't get back to sleep, it's usually hormonal, right? If you wake up around 3 o'clock, there are exceptions to that. It could be a blood sugar issue, but for the most part, it's usually an issue of hormones. Okay, I need you to be my clicker. Okay, so speaking of melatonin, supplement melatonin levels may allow the use of reduced progesterone doses in HR without increasing uterine cancer risk. Melatonin has a protective effect in the uterus, since night shift workers, especially obese women, have higher risk of endometrial cancer, and women with endometrial cancer have lower melatonin levels. This is important to understand. Since melatonin downregulates uterine estrogen receptors, increases uterine progesterone receptor expression. It has the potential to augment progesterone effects while diminishing estrogen stimulation of the uterus despite a low progesterone dose. Basically what it's saying here is that if you have low levels of melatonin, you're going to disrupt your natural balance between estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so we have a lot of ladies nowadays that are more estrogen dominant, okay, and there's many reasons for this, but if you get melatonin through sleep, now I'm not suggesting go and get melatonin supplement. If you're going to use a supplement melatonin, use it for a short amount of time, like if you're jet lagged, but don't use large amounts for long periods of time, because it will shut down your body's natural production of it. Okay, so let's go on. Is this working now? Okay, all right. So sunlight. Yes, sunlight is what? It's a hormone, right? Hormone. It's vitamin D, but it's a hormone. And 10% of your genes require vitamin D for proper regulation. And so if you lack vitamin D, you're going to have some serious problems, especially with depression, because we have vitamin D receptors in the frontal lobe. I remember I was stationed in Japan. I was in a place called Niigata. I was there for 1 year, and for 6 months a year, it doesn't have any sunlight. And I got really depressed. Occasionally the sun would just peek through the clouds, and it could be snowing outside. You just take your shirt off and in the snow and just land it. It was just fantastic. But it made me realize how much we need sunlight. And so the further you go away from sunlight, epidemiological studies show that the more depression. There's some places on the earth, they're just for penguins, okay? Not for human habitation. All right, we were in Michigan. We suffered a little bit from the blues of lack of vitamin D, sunlight. It would be 6 months of snow, and the snow would be outside. It would never go away until you had the summer. Even it would snow in June sometimes. It was crazy. But so we need sunlight. And if your vitamin D levels go too low, this will affect hormone production. And they've done studies on this, especially in men. You lower your testosterone levels if you don't have enough vitamin D. And this can be problematic later in life. Anyway, I've got to stop there. I'll continue this this evening. Do we have time for a couple of questions, or is that okay? Has anyone got any questions? No. All right. I'm going to leave you with the better news at the end. Okay. So you come back tonight because all these things have remedies. Okay. So don't feel that oh no, if I got this, we can't do anything about it. No, all these things can be corrected if we know how the body works. We need to understand the physiology so we can understand the mechanisms to how to correct that. All right. Deep in thought, I see all these brains ticking here. All right, no questions, comments. All right, yes, Stephen.
So you said vitamin is a hormone.
Yes.
So in times, that's something you want to take as a supplement.
Yeah, you're gonna need it if you don't get sunlight. Yeah. So now. Yes. Now you can get enough vitamin D and not be able to convert it. So that's a problem. I've seen people who are out in the sun all day. They're farmers or they're landscapers, whatever, and they still have low vitamin D levels. Okay, so there's reasons for that. It could be a problem with the digestion, could be with the liver function, could be with the kidney. It could be that they have high stress levels. High stress will affect vitamin D conversion. There are even soaps wash off vitamin D. There's lots of things that go into that. Anyway, I'm going to finish here, but I just want to say my wife is here. That's my wife at the back here. If you see me gazing in her eyes lovingly, you know that's my wife, okay? And her name's Amy, and she's been a bit of a guinea pig for the last 20 years. And hopefully later we'll be able to share some testimonies with you about how God has been working in our lives when it comes to health. So, all right. Well, I'll let you go back to your exercise and fresh air and sunlight. And I promise tonight we'll have some really good news for you all when it comes to hormones. All right.